Now let's begin this one. Daniel Morrison had built his life like he built his construction empire, with precision, patience, and an unforgiving attention to detail. At 38, he owned Morrison Development, the most successful residential construction company in Cedar Falls. His reputation was built on two things: delivering exactly what he promised and never forgetting when someone crossed him. The irony wasn't lost on him that the house where everything unraveled was one he'd built himself. It was a Tuesday evening in October when his world shifted on its axis. Catherine, his wife of 10 years, had just left for the grocery store with her usual weekly list. Daniel was in his home office, reviewing blueprints for a new subdivision, when 7-year-old Emma appeared in his doorway. Emma was precocious for her age, with Catherine's auburn hair and Daniel's sharp green eyes. She had a habit of observing everything and saying little until it mattered. "Daddy," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the stairs. "We have to get out. Right now." Daniel looked up from his blueprints, smiling. Emma had been going through a phase of dramatic proclamations lately. Last week, she declared they needed to evacuate because she was sure there was a monster in the attic, which turned out to be a raccoon. "Why?" he laughed, setting down his pencil. Emma's face was pale, more serious than he'd ever seen her. She pointed upstairs and trembled. "We don't have time. We have to leave this house now." Something in her voice, a genuine terror that cut through her usual childhood fears, made Daniel's smile fade. He grabbed the car keys from his desk and stood up. "Emma, what did you see?" "I heard Mommy talking," she whispered before she left. "She was upstairs in your bedroom, but she wasn't alone." Daniel's blood went cold. "What do you mean she wasn't alone?" "There was a man, Uncle Trevor. They were talking about you, Daddy, about making you go away." "Trevor Higgins." Daniel's throat tightened. His business partner of 5 years, his closest friend, the man who'd been best man at his wedding. The man Catherine had sworn she barely tolerated. "Emma, are you sure about what you heard?" She nodded vigorously. "They said something about tonight, about how you wouldn't be coming home. Uncle Trevor said the police would think it was an accident." Daniel's mind raced. Catherine had been acting strangely for months, distant, secretive, always on her phone. He'd attributed it to stress from Emma's starting second grade and his busy work schedule. But Trevor had access to everything. The business, the house, Daniel's schedule, his routines. "We're leaving," Daniel said, scooping Emma up. Right now, as they headed toward the garage, Daniel's phone buzzed. "A text from Catherine. Forgot my wallet. Coming back for it. Give me 10 minutes, then I'll head to the store." 10 minutes. Whatever they had planned was supposed to happen in the next 10 minutes. Daniel strapped Emma into her car's seat and backed out of the garage, his mind already shifting into the cold, calculating mode that had made him successful in business. As they drove toward the police station, he called his lawyer, his accountant, and his head of security, a former Marine named Rick Sullivan who'd been helping with site security for Daniel's construction projects. "Rick, I need you to meet me at the police station. Bring the surveillance equipment we've been testing for the job sites. All of it. Dan, my wife and my business partner are trying to kill me. I need evidence, and I need it tonight." The police took Daniel's report seriously, especially when Emma repeated what she'd heard with startling clarity. Detective Linda Reyes, a sharp woman in her 40s, seemed particularly interested in the timeline. "Your wife thinks you're still at home?" she asked. "As far as she knows, yes. She texted that she'd be back in 10 minutes. That was 40 minutes ago." Detective Reyes nodded to her partner. "Let's send a unit to do a wellness check." While they waited, Rick arrived with enough surveillance equipment to stock a small electronics store. A former military intelligence officer, Rick had been Daniel's most trusted employee for 3 years. He was also the only person Daniel had ever told about his father's murder when Daniel was 16, a crime that had never been solved, but which Daniel had spent 20 years quietly investigating and planning retribution for. "Boss, talk to me," Rick said, setting up a laptop in the police station conference room. Daniel explained the situation while Emma colored quietly in the corner, wearing noise-canceling headphones the child psychologist had provided. "I think they've been planning this for months. Maybe longer. What's your play?" Daniel's smile was cold. "We give them exactly what they think they want. But first, I need to know everything. Every meeting, every phone call, every text message. I want to know when this started and how deep it goes. The wellness check revealed an empty house with signs of hasty departure. Catherine's purse was gone, along with a suitcase that had been in their bedroom closet. More telling was what Daniel's security system had recorded. Trevor's car in the driveway at 3 p.m., 2 hours before Catherine claimed she was going to the store. Over the next 3 days, while staying in a secure hotel with Emma, Daniel began to understand the scope of the betrayal. Rick's investigation revealed that Catherine and Trevor had been planning not just his murder, but the theft of his entire company. They'd been slowly moving assets, creating shell companies, and positioning themselves to claim everything after his accidental death. The insurance policy Catherine had convinced him to increase 6 months ago suddenly made sense. So did Trevor's insistence on restructuring their business partnership to include a succession clause that would transfer Daniel's shares to the surviving partner in case of death. But Daniel's real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Emma herself. "Daddy," she said on Thursday morning as they had breakfast in their hotel room, "I remembered something else." "What's that, sweetheart?" When Uncle Trevor was talking to Mommy, he said something about Grandpa Danny, Daniel's father, the man who'd been killed in what police had ruled a construction accident, a beam that fell at just the wrong moment, crushing Daniel Morrison Sr. while he was inspecting a job site. What did Uncle Trevor say about Grandpa Danny? He said it worked once, it would work again. The room seemed to tilt. Daniel had always suspected his father's death wasn't an accident, but he'd never had proof. Now suddenly he realized that Trevor Higgins, who'd been a junior safety inspector 22 years ago, had been involved. Rick looked up from his laptop. "Boss, you need to see this. I've been digging into Trevor's background like you asked." The screen showed a series of connections Daniel had never noticed. Trevor hadn't just happened into Daniel's life 5 years ago. He'd specifically targeted him, befriending him, positioning himself to become a business partner, even encouraging Daniel's relationship with Catherine, whom Trevor had dated briefly in college. "It's been a long con," Rick said quietly. "Everything. Your marriage, the business partnership, all of it. He's been planning this for years." Daniel felt something cold and final settle in his chest. He'd built his reputation on never forgetting, never forgiving. But this wasn't just betrayal. This was the man who'd murdered his father and spent 2 decades planning to murder him too. "Rick, I need you to start making some calls. I want to buy the construction company that employs Trevor's brother. I want to acquire the mortgage on his mother's house. I want controlling interest in every business his family has ever worked for." "Boss, I'm not killing them," Daniel said, his voice as cold as winter steel. "I'm going to destroy everything they've ever cared about, piece by piece, until they beg me to put them out of their misery. And then I'm going to say no." Catherine and Trevor had been hiding in a rental cabin 3 hours north of Cedar Falls, waiting for news of Daniel's death that would never come. When they realized their plan had failed, they tried to run, but Daniel had anticipated this too. Rick's contacts in law enforcement had quietly flagged their credit cards and phones. More importantly, Daniel had spent the past week systematically dismantling their escape routes. The shell companies they'd created to hide stolen assets? Daniel bought the bank that held their accounts. The private investigator Trevor had hired to help fake evidence of Daniel's infidelity? Daniel owned the building where his office was located and had evicted him. Most devastating of all was what Daniel did to their families. Trevor's brother Mark worked for Precision Engineering, a firm that had just been acquired by Morrison Development. His first day under new management was also his last day of employment. Trevor's mother received an eviction notice for the house she'd lived in for 30 years, a house whose mortgage had recently been sold to a property management company owned by Daniel Morrison. Catherine's sister Jennifer found her small catering business suddenly unable to get permits for any events. Her parents discovered that their retirement community had been purchased by a larger corporation that was restructuring its resident agreements. By the time Catherine and Trevor realized what was happening, Daniel had systematically destroyed the financial security of everyone they cared about. But he wasn't finished. The confrontation came on a Friday night in November. Catherine and Trevor, desperate and cornered, broke into Daniel's house. the same house where Emma had saved his life 3 weeks earlier. They were waiting for him when he arrived home from Emma's school play. "You sick bastard," Catherine screamed as Daniel walked through his front door. "You're destroying innocent people." Daniel looked at his wife of 10 years, this woman he'd loved and trusted, and felt nothing but disgust. Innocent? Like my father was innocent when Trevor arranged for that beam to fall? Like I was innocent when you married me as part of a plan to eventually murder me? Trevor stepped out of the shadows, holding a gun with shaking hands. "You don't understand, Dan. Your father, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. It was supposed to be quick, clean, but he fought back. So you've been planning to finish the job ever since? Your father cost my family everything." Trevor's mask finally slipped completely. "He outbid us on every project, stole every contract. My dad's construction company went bankrupt because of Daniel Morrison Sr. My family lost everything. So you murdered him. And then you spent 20 years infiltrating my life so you could murder me too." Catherine raised her own gun, Daniel's gun, taken from his bedroom safe. "It wasn't supposed to be personal, Dan. But then you had to be so unforgiving, so ruthless. We knew you'd never stop if you found out." "You're right," Daniel said calmly. "I wouldn't." "Well, now it doesn't matter," Trevor said, steadying his aim. "This time, it really will look like an accident. Murder-suicide. Devoted husband kills cheating wife and her lover, then turns the gun on himself." That's when Rick Sullivan emerged from the kitchen behind them, along with Detective Reyes and 3 other officers. The entire conversation had been broadcast live to police headquarters through the surveillance equipment Rick had hidden throughout the house days earlier. Catherine and Trevor were arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and in Trevor's case, the murder of Daniel Morrison Sr., a case that was reopened based on new evidence Rick had uncovered during his investigation. But Daniel's revenge wasn't finished in the courtroom. Over the next 6 months, as Catherine and Trevor awaited trial, Daniel systematically rebuilt the lives of their family members, but only after making them understand exactly who was responsible for their suffering. Trevor's mother got her house back, but not until she'd spent 2 months in a homeless shelter, learning what her son's choices had cost her. Catherine's sister's business was saved, but only after she'd publicly denounced her sister's actions in a newspaper interview. The message was clear. Daniel Morrison never forgave, and he never forgot, but he also never punished the innocent for the guilty's sins, once the guilty had paid their price. Catherine and Trevor both received life sentences. Catherine, in a final desperate attempt to save herself, tried to claim she'd been coerced, that she'd never wanted to hurt Daniel. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, financial documents, and most damning of all, a recording Rick had discovered of Catherine and Trevor planning Daniel's murder in detail. The last time Daniel saw his wife was in the courthouse hallway after sentencing. She was crying, begging him to forgive her, claiming she still loved him. "Daniel, please," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. I was scared, confused. We could start over, we could." Daniel looked at her with the same cold expression he'd worn the night they were arrested. "Catherine, I want you to listen very carefully. For the next 30 years, while you're sitting in that cell, I want you to remember something. I built a life with you. I trusted you with my child, my business, my heart. And you conspired to murder me for money." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "I will visit Emma in prison before I visit you. You are dead to me." As he walked away, Catherine's sobs echoing behind him, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since his father's death: peace. Emma, now 8 years old and in therapy to process everything she'd been through, had one question for her father as they drove home from the courthouse. "Daddy, why didn't Uncle Trevor just say he was sorry?" Daniel glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, this brave little girl who'd save his life with her courage and honesty. "Because some people think sorry is enough to fix anything, sweetheart. But some things can't be fixed. They can only be ended." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Are we going to build a new house?" "We are," Daniel said, smiling for the first time in months. "And this time, we're going to make sure it has very, very good security." As they drove toward their new life, Daniel made 2 promises to himself. He would never again make the mistake of trusting someone who hadn't earned it completely, and he would never again underestimate the lengths to which desperate people would go to get what they wanted. But most importantly, he would never forget that sometimes a 7-year-old's whispered warning could save your life, if you were smart enough to listen. The Morrison name would endure. The betrayers were gone, and Daniel Morrison had learned that sometimes the most effective revenge wasn't destruction. It was simply ensuring that justice was served completely, thoroughly, and without mercy. In the end, Catherine and Trevor had gotten exactly what they'd planned for Daniel, a life sentence. They just hadn't expected to be the one serving it.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.